Hi, I'm Jack, your host, with my guest, Paw on the Trail. So, a little about me. I'm starting a podcast where I will ask people questions on things they do. I am Paw's grandson, and I want to start this podcast to improve my knowledge on a variety of topics. I find exploring things to be fun and helpful, and starting this is useful because a child's perspective is unique. We think different than adults, and adults have learned more, but we often have more common sense and can see things in a different way. Kids' ideas have just as much to offer, and I want to encourage all kids to make their voices be heard. And a little on Paw.
As Jack said, I'm Jack's grandfather, and I'm blogging my trip on the Appalachian Trail, primarily for myself, so I can remember what I did. I'm sure there'll be so many things that happened that I want to try to recapture it all. And secondly, because I want my grandchildren and my daughters to understand why I've decided to do this. And when the grandchildren get older, maybe they'll try things that are really difficult and understand that they can complete their goals, but it's never always easy. You just have to believe in yourself and keep going.
So let's get straight into the questions. What inspired you to hike the trail?
Okay, so I love being in the outdoors, and I've camped, I've backpacked, but I've never thru hiked before, and the most I've ever spent is 5 days outdoors. But the benefits I got out of it were so personal that I wanted to experience it in an even more extreme way. So I met a guy that had done the trail, and I really got mesmerized with his hike. And then he lent me a book, read the book, which led to another book, which led to some YouTube videos. And then I started reading trail journals, and pretty soon I was hooked. I realized this was something I wanted to do very, very bad.
So, have you found others who inspire you to hike the trail?
Good question. Everybody that I've followed, either in journals or YouTube videos or a few people that I've met now, their stories seem to directly affect their life and change their outlook on life. And so I want this to experience for myself and see what it tells me.
So, have you met anyone who's hiked the trail, who's planning to, or even anyone who hasn't hiked the trail or isn't even planning on, but they had told you that it was something that you should do?
No. I've only met one person that's actually hiked the whole trail.
Wow. What are some fears you have or had about the trail?
Well, initially, I didn't think I'd fear anything because I'd been backpacking enough. But when I started realizing a thru hike is different than just going out for 4 or 5 days. So on one of my test hikes, I found myself alone for the first time. I've hiked alone before. That didn't bother me, but I never spent a night by myself. And when darkness came, it was really dark. And so I started thinking about things like bears, things like that. And it made me a little nervous. I wasn't fearful that I was going to die or anything, but I was conscious of it. But I did sleep fine, and the next day I felt a lot better.
So, speaking of things that scare you, like bears, how often do you think people actually encounter bears, or have you encountered a bear?
I have not encountered a bear yet, so that will be a unique experience. I did take a short class with the wildlife personnel at Amicalola Falls State Park, And the only thing that they said was that the black bear is not very aggressive, but if you get around a mother and her cubs, that you need to back away and just let her get with her cubs and don't restrict her in any way from that. But mostly they just tell you, make yourself as big as you can and make noise, and you probably won't have any problem.
And how do you overcome those fears?
That's a good question. I guess I'll find that out on the trail because some of it, you know, I've watched YouTube videos and I've seen people encounter bears, and I've not heard of hardly anybody having any problems. But getting back to fears, one of the biggest fears I have is ticks. That's a kind of a silent fear, really, because they can get on top of you and you not know they're there. And then after a week, you're very sick, and you can develop some severe illness to the point that you have to get off the trail. So that'll be important. And another fear that I've heard about, but it didn't occur to me to be afraid of it, they said that a moose is as dangerous as a bear. So I'll be looking, and I want to see a moose, so we'll see.
What skills do you have coming into hiking that made you confident that you will achieve hiking the trail?
Well, I have backpacked for many years, and I've camped outside. I tend to be a very determined person. I don't give up very easy because hiking's very hard, and at times you mentally want to quit, or you just get tired, and you have to overcome that. So the physical challenge is going to be pretty great, especially I'm 63 and not as young as I used to be. But the mental part, I am told, and I've experienced this as well, is the biggest thing that might make you quit.
So, do you think that you have to be young or super active to hike the trail?
No. And that's not from my experience, but I've watched hundreds and hundreds of people now on YouTube who'd seemed very ill prepared. And I've read several books too. But you learn as you go, and if you don't start out too fast and let your body get acclimated to what you're trying to do, you learn the things you need to learn, and you get strong enough that you can do it. It takes probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks before you really get your legs in shape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even if you're fairly in good shape, because we're not really built to hike every day, day after day. Like I said, I've gone out for 4 or 5 days at a time, but that fifth day I was getting in my car and going home in my bed and, and comfort of home. But in this case, I won't have that. Once a week or so, I'll go to a town and maybe get a hostel or a motel and get a good shower and a bed. But for the most part, you're just walking.
So, how have you tested and trained and prepared yourself for the Appalachian Trail?
You're going to laugh at this one. I haven't trained at all. Because I am going with that. I mean, I'm trying to be in good shape, don't get me wrong. I've done 4 test hikes. I've tested all my equipment. I've tested myself. I've been through several big storms. I've read a lot. But as far as working out and just trying to get in shape, I'm going to let the trail do that for me. Again, because you can get in shape to run a race, however far, 30 miles. But this is 6 months of hiking. You cannot get in shape for that. You have to let the trail get you in shape. So I'm not concerned so much with that. In fact, I'm getting in kind of out of shape, really, because one of the problems I'll have is maintaining my weight. And so I'm trying to get as fat as I can get before I leave.
So, as you said, you're gonna let the trail make you fit. Do you think after this you would train your body to stay as fit as it was on the trail?
That'll be a challenge too. Most of the people that I've watched and read go back to their old habits. I'm going to try to change mine, but we'll see when I get off the trail, because no matter what goals we set, if we don't stick to them, we just kind of fall back in our old ways.
Tell me about the gear you found.
Okay, so I did a lot of research, maybe too much, but I wanted to have certain things that I could really count on. One was my pack. I found one that's waterproof, so I don't have to have a cover over the top of it, and I can be assured that everything's going to be dry when I get to camp, because that's the main thing, is staying dry. And you keep one pair of dry clothes in your pack. You only wear them at camp, and you never get them wet, and that way you've always got a dry pair. My tent was another thing I'm going to be sleeping in it for 60 days. So I wanted a really good tent, and they're expensive. When you start buying equipment of that level, they're really expensive. And I needed to not be too heavy. And so I bought a very light tent. It's similar to my backpack. It's waterproof. It has some negatives that go with that, but I am overjoyed in my test hikes with both of those, and especially the tent. I feel really, really secure and free from any weather. I've even sat through 35-mile-an-hour winds, and I've had no problems. Never got a drop inside the tent. Other equipment. Okay, my sleeping pad. That one was a little tricky because, again, you want to go as light as you can, but I didn't feel comfortable on the real lightweight ones, and so I didn't sleep as good. And they say if you don't sleep good, you don't hike good. So I had a sleeping pad for 20-some years that I just really liked. And I decided I was going to get a new one because it did fail on me. It deflated on one of my test hikes. But I bought the same thing for the hike, even though it's pretty heavy. But I know I'm going to sleep good.
Is there any gear you just had to say goodbye to?
Well, starting January 1, I'm going to reevaluate every piece of equipment I'm taking. I'm going to weigh it. I'm going to look at alternatives that might be lighter. So right now, I can't say that I have. There were 3 things that I took from my previous backpacking experience. None of them are coming on the hike. So I'm basically starting out brand new. I bought a new cook pot, and I like it, but it's a little bit small. So I've got to add, it's a 500 milliliter, and I'm going to go up to a 750 before I go. So that's another piece of equipment I'll change out. I don't have any rain gloves yet. I do have some, but they won't be going. They're too big, and they wouldn't be good for the summer. And I need something for the summer, which brings me up to a good point. A lot of people will take cold weather gear to start out when it's colder. Mm-hmm. Then they send it home and they have summer gear sent in. Summer gear is lighter. I didn't plan on doing that just because I didn't want the expense of the shipping. I didn't think it was going to gain me that much. After my 4 test hikes, though, I'm starting to think a little bit different. So I've got till April before I start. I may make some changes. One of the things that I'm thinking of doing is not cooking in the summer. I'll just eat sandwiches and stuff like that. Everything will be cold. No, I won't heat up anything. Now, I have to give up my coffee in the morning, but I'm willing to do that to save that weight of the fuel and the stove. I'm trying to think of another piece of equipment that failed me. My cooking pot, my sleeping pad failed, but that wasn't a problem with the pad. That was pretty old, so made sense that it went bad. Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that.
What food are you planning on bringing?
All right, so for breakfast, I've got a granola mix, and I will put chia seeds in it and probably some craisins. And then on some other days, I might eat Pop-Tarts. I might eat some energy bars. Then I'll have a snack maybe 2 hours down the trail. A Snickers bar, or you can eat anything you want on the trail, as long as you can carry it. Lunch, I'm going to have tortillas with chicken, summer sausage, pepperoni, tuna, cheese, things like that. Or peanut butter and jelly. One of the pieces of gear that I'm taking, and it's kind of controversial because, again, it's heavy, is a bear canister. I don't know if you want to hear about a bear canister, but they're basically a plastic that a bear can't unscrew the lid. He can't carry it off because he has to carry it with two hands, and he can't walk on two legs, and he can't crush it. So they're very heavy, but the good thing about it is, you've got a stool so you can sit, and that's a rare thing when you find a nice place to sit when you're living in the woods. But I can also put bread in there and it doesn't crush it. Or I can put crackers and things, it protects food better. So that's lunch. And then dinner will be ramen noodles with chicken again, pepperoni, tuna fish, whatever.
So, speaking of bear canisters, do you recommend having one like you have, or having one that you hang in a tree?
Well, I started out hanging in a tree, and when you hiked all day, and then you got to hunt a proper tree. You can find trees to hang bags, but they're not always good trees. And then you got to hang it, and then you find out, oh, I forgot I left this in the bag, and then you got to lower it down and you got to raise it up. There's a lot of work involved there. And bears have, because there's so many people on the trail, they're getting used to finding food around campsites, especially around shelters. And so they're basically an opportunistic animal, and they like easy food. So they smell that food, and then they go to the campsite. They can climb a tree. The recommended hanging is 20 foot up, I believe, 6 feet out and 6 feet down. So you go out a branch 6 feet off the main trunk, and then you let it hang from a rope 6 feet off of that. Well, bears have learned how to even get those. And I've heard many stories now of bears getting people's food. And so that's a danger because, A, you got to go to town then because you're out of food. B, the bear gets used to getting food, and so he comes back for more and he becomes a nuisance bear. And eventually they have to euthanize him. So by going with a bear canister, you're preserving not only your food, but possibly the bear's life.
Do you have a plan for if any gear malfunctions?
Yeah, so when you hike, you look at the day and where you're planning on going to. And then you look for bailout points, like maybe you cross a road. So if something fails, and I've had a couple failures already, I've been able to fix them, patch them until I got to town. If it's something you can't fix and something you can't do without, then the first road, you got to go back to town.
So do you plan staying with other people in a shelter, or do you plan staying further from shelters?
Okay, so to answer that, and first I want to say this, okay, I've got all these plans and I've thought about this over and over, and some people would say I thought about it too much. I just kind of enjoyed doing it so far, but I understand that one change in my plan is going to affect all the other plans. And so some things I don't know and I'll have to find out on the trail. As far as people go, my plan is to stay near shelters most of the time in my tent. I've stayed in some shelters on my test hikes, and I will utilize them if I know a bad storm's coming and I want to avoid being out in it. And I want to be around people too, because I want to meet people. That's part of what I'm doing. I'm interested in learning and being around people that like hiking. But there'll be times when A, I'm too tired to make it to a shelter, or B, there's a very pretty spot and I just would like to spend the night there. And so then at those times, I will call what they call stealth camp, and that's just away from a normal campsite.
Are there any locations along the trail that you're very excited for?
A bunch of them. That's kind of what makes this whole thing exciting. Each day you're going to a new destination, and you don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what you're going to experience. You don't know if today's the day you'll see a bear. Will you see a deer? You know, like one night, my first night out, I never forget this. It was a beautiful night. I heard an owl. That was so neat to be out in the middle. And these are forests. These aren't just woods. These have really big trees, bigger than what you would normally see in just a park. And that was kind of neat. And I was laying in bed, and I woke up, and my tent doors are open. I sleep with them open unless it's a storm. And so my head's laying to the side, and I'm looking out the tent, and there's a full moon coming up. And it was 2 a.m, something like that. And it was it was a great experience. So I'm looking forward to the things like that. Town-wise, the Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, I'm really looking forward to that. It's 108 miles long, and it just looks like it's really, really nice. There's a place in North Carolina where there's wild ponies, and the trail goes right through that park, and the ponies come up to you. Maine is just full of beautiful places that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I've got my mindset. Now, town-wise, these are all states I've never been to. So every time I go to a town, it's someplace new. And so I think the whole thing's going to be an adventure.
So I know you're not starting off with anyone when you hike the trail, but do you think that you might find a group of people that you would sort of hike with?
That's a very good possibility, and I hope so. One of the things about the trail is you tend to hike with people, and because you're all doing the same thing, going through the same struggles, climbing these mountains and facing the weather and whatever happens to happen, but you become fast friends. And in fact, you end up becoming closer than you would in your normal life. It might take a year to get as close to the person because you're so focused together on this trip. And then there is some mountains in New Hampshire that are very steep, very dangerous, and I'm a little concerned about those, and I hope that I've got a hiking partner when I go through there.
How often do you plan to have a town day?
Again, the plan is the plan, but what actually is going to happen, I don't know. Part of it's going to depending on how I feel. If I hike 50 miles and I'm really sore and I need a day off, I'll have to take a day off. There's no sense ruining my hike in the first 100 miles. So some of it's going to be dependent on how I feel. Initially, I'm planning on going into a town at least once a week, because I don't plan on carrying more than 5 or 6 days worth of food. But that might mean just going into the town, getting more food, and going back out. That, it doesn't mean I have to spend the night. But there are goals maybe of trying to make it 150 to 250 miles before I take a day off. If I did that, I would be pretty happy.
So if you get injured or break anything, do you have like a certain person you would go to first, or would you just wait it
You mean a doctor or something, or?
out? Like just someone in general to help
Okay.
you.
So I've never been hurt, and so that would be a first. So my understanding of what would happen is, um, hikers are a community of people, and they help each other. And so if I was hurt, my guess is that there would be people come along that would assist me if I needed it. Um, but I would probably have to get to town the first chance I could and take an x-ray if it was a bone, if it was a sickness, maybe get some medicine. But that's something you do risk, and that's, a sprained ankle and you got 10 miles to go is not a good thing. But you know what? You don't have any choice. So unless it's really severe and you cannot walk, you've got to try to keep going. I will have a device that if I get in serious trouble, I can alert authorities and they can tell where I'm at exactly, because it works off satellite, and they can find the coordinates of that satellite and they'll know where I'm at.
So, say you get sick and you go to the doctor and they give you medicine. Would you keep hiking and take the medicine, or would you wait until you weren't sick?
That'd be a day-by-day decision. My guess is I'd take at least one day.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor will tell me what he thinks, and then I'll make a judgment based on what I think.
What would you like to do in town?
That's something I thought about. I don't know if I'm going to have time. What I'd like to do, I want to know a little bit about the history of the town. So if I take a day off, okay, in other words, that means you hike into town, you spend the night, and you stay there the whole day, and then stay again the next night and go back out the next day. If I do something like that, and I'll do at least 7 of those probably, a minimum, I'm going to go to the library, and I'm going to research the town and probably put it in my blog. And so, yeah, that's kind of it. I want to learn something about all these towns and areas that I go through.
So, where will you start your end of the trail, and where will it finish?
Okay, normally you would start in Georgia, and you would go north, all the way to Maine, which is 2,200 miles. But there's a lot of people that start in Georgia. It's become pretty popular hike. Having said that, only 1 in 4 people finish. So those are my odds. And the question is, can I beat the odds? But with all those people starting, the trail is overrun with people to start with. Mm-hmm. And there's a group called the Appalachian Trail Conference, or Conservancy, I should say. Their job is to kind of keep tabs on the health of the trail and the wellness of hikers and things like that. And so they're advocating that people start in the middle and go one direction and then get back to the middle and go the other direction. Or you might flip-flop all the way to the other end and then go back to the middle. So I'm doing a modified flip-flop. So instead of starting at the halfway point, I'm starting at mile 1,500 and something. And then I'm going to hike 700 miles to Katahdin, Mount Katahdin, which is the end point in Maine. Then I'm going back to where I started, and I've got about 500 miles home, maybe 600. I'd have to do the exact math, because until a couple weeks ago, I didn't really know exactly where I was starting. I think I figured that out now.
Mm-hmm. When are you starting, and how will that affect your finish?
I think it's going to be good for me. One reason is when you start in Georgia, you have to start earlier in the year. So the weather's colder. I'm starting in April. It'll still be cold in Virginia. It could still snow even, but the chances get less and less with just a few weeks' time. So the other thing about Virginia is it's 500 miles long. That's almost a fourth of the whole trail is in one state. So people that start on either end, the north side or the south side, when they get to Virginia, they don't think they're ever getting out because it takes about a month to just get out of one state. And the way I've done it, I'll be out of that portion of the state in about 3 weeks, and then 2 or 3 weeks on the other side. So I've kind of split Virginia up.
Do you plan to have anyone or anything along the way to meet you?
I don't have plans, firm plans, although I've been told that my daughters may bring you and Lily and Grace, your sisters, and your mother, and meet up with me somewhere. So that would be neat. That'd be fun. That'd be a very big, uplifting moment, really, because at times, it's a long trip, and I don't know how much I'm going to miss my family and you. Well, you are my family. But I don't know how I'm going to react to that. That's the one thing I can't predict.
What do you plan to do with this hike, or what does it mean to you?
It means a lot, but I don't think it means as much about finishing, just saying that I hiked the trail. I'm more wanting to have the total experience, to live kind of simply, because all I have is, my tent, 2 pairs of clothes, a raincoat, some food. That's about it. Sleeping bag. So you don't really need much. I shouldn't say I won't be around. We can talk about electronics here in a minute. I will have some electronics. But I'll get to experience nature in its totality. So, in other words, I get up in nature and I go to bed in nature, and it's day after day after day again. And I think that has a different effect on you than simply just going out for the night or a weekend or something like that. The other part about it is I'd like to figure out kind of more focused on what I want to do when I get back. I've always wanted to give back, and I've been pretty busy just keeping myself working and healthy and, normal responsibilities. And so I'm hoping that I have some free time when I come back that I can find something in the community to give back to.
What do you plan to do after hiking the trail?
One of the things I'm going to do, I've already started, and this is, again, part of the magic of the trail, I think. I've initially planned to do this to figure out all these things for myself and to experience these things for myself. But when people found out I was doing it, they became excited for me and wanted to follow me, just interested in the trail. And that in itself, I think, is positive. So maybe I can bring some light on what nature has to give us and why we should take care of it. And then one of the things I wanted to do is work with younger boys and men, or young men, who are struggling a little bit. I grew up and I struggled quite a bit. I didn't have a father, and I kind of relate to that. And there's people out there that are struggling, young guys, and I can be a motivator for them and maybe give them something to hang their hat on as they go forward. And again, it's kind of giving back, just like the people that helped me out when I needed help. Maybe I can give them something to get excited about.
How will hiking the trail impact the next phase in your life?
Well, again, I think the trail's going to have to tell me that, and that's one of the hopes I have of the trail, is that life away from the distractions of everyday life will allow me the time to meditate and contemplate what gifts I have and what gifts I can give back.
What advice do you have for me and our listeners about following our dreams and making our own adventures?
That is a good question, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the blog and I wanted to do this podcast, and I want you guys to be involved in the hike. Follow me along and keep communication open. So the hike itself is really hard physically. It's also very hard emotionally. When you climb mountains, and again, I've done 4 hikes now, and I kind of understand this already. You get to a point when you just think you can't go on, or you're just too tired. And yet, what are you going to do? You can't sit down and just stay there. You got to pick yourself up and you got to keep going. But then when you get to the top of the mountain, all that doubt that you had and the reasons why you thought you couldn't do it, they're gone, and you feel like, man, I did it. I got it. And so that's kind of how life is. It's a journey, just like the trail's a journey. And you've just got to, as things come up, you just got to learn to handle them and keep going and believe in yourself that you can do it. Because I've read some books of people that just had no business finishing the hike, but they learned, and they watched other people, and they got confidence, and they ended up finishing. So it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish.
Do you have anyone that has really encouraged you because they were saying, oh no, this is something that you won't be able to do, but you are wanting to prove them wrong? Or anybody who thought that you were too old?
Not really. I mean, I've had people tell me, why would you want to do that? Or, I can't believe you're doing that. Or some people even said it's selfish. You're leaving your family and you're going to be gone for 6 months. And I just have to look at myself and say, what do I feel? There's a saying called, you have to hike your own hike. And I kind of adhere to that. If you are always hiking somebody else's hike, at some point you're going to say, gosh, I wish I'd have done my own hike. And so I can't listen to people that are negative. But that's been very few, and most people are so encouraging. And what I found is that's more important, and it's real important, because when you're out there hiking, like I said, and your mind is saying, you know what, you can't do this. Why did you get started? Those people that have encouraged you, their voices come up, and they can help you and push you through that. It's just mind over matter, I guess. But collectively, you can take all the people that are supporting you, and you can become more than what you are, really, because you do have to get through it. One of the first things a guy asked me, or a guy that was hiking said, he said, there'll be a time, and maybe more than one time, that you're going to ask yourself, why am I out here? And if you don't have an answer for that, then you're going to go home. So I've had to really study myself and say, is this something I really want to do? Because I'm going to be asking that question at some point.